Today, we are talking about boundaries because of how important they are for our health, our happiness, the quality of our relationships. Many of us don't realize that so many of the things that we are struggling with that are holding us back and bringing us down are because our boundaries suck. And the reason why most of us have sucky boundaries is because some of us don't even really know what a healthy boundary is. And the rest of us, what we've learned about boundaries is wrong. A lot of the information out there about what a boundary is and what a boundary isn't is not accurate information. And so you are going through and setting boundaries and they're not working. And that's because of what you've been taught and how you've been taught it. So today, I'm going to clear a few things up, going to equip you with some tools and information so that you can go and start setting better boundaries. And I also want you to stay right through to the end because I have a really exciting announcement for you, something that I want you to come and be a part of. So make sure that you watch to the end so you can get all of the information about that. You don't want to miss it. If you are new to me and this is the first time that you are here, welcome to our amazing little corner on the internet. Introduce yourself in the comment section below. Let us know who you are and where you're from, and we'd love to connect with you. And if you are back again, welcome here. Thank you guys so much, my loyal people, my loyal family here on YouTube. I really, really appreciate you. And I see you in the comments and I see you coming back time and time again and sharing your thoughts and your insights and your words of encouragement and having conversations. And I love that. Regardless, my name is Kristina and I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, and the creator of the Breakthrough Coaching Program. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology and I work to help heart-centered go-getter men and women break through the crap that is holding them back, so they can like themselves and their lives more every day. So boundaries, they are not about trying to change anyone else. They actually, in most cases, have very little to do with anyone else. Essentially, a boundary is what I need to do for me, given what's happening in this situation. And they often come after making a request for change. And if the person is unwilling to meet that request or unwilling to change, then we do what we need to do in light of that. And so they are not dependent on somebody else being or acting or doing certain things a certain way. Because as soon as we base our happiness and our well-being on certain people being and acting a certain way, we give all our power away. And then my happiness is dependent on something that I have very little say over. Somebody else, their own choices, their own thoughts, their own beliefs, their own stuff is what is driving their own behavior. And I cannot stop that. I cannot change that. I can request that things be different, but ultimately it is up to them. So putting all our eggs, all our happiness eggs in the basket of someone else being a certain way so we can be okay is a recipe for disaster and a really frustrated, resentful, unhappy life. So then what is a boundary? Well, it is an assertion of my choice based on your choice. It is not an ultimatum. It is saying, if this is what you choose to do, this is what I choose to do. Let me give you an example of this. A little while ago, when I first started working as a therapist, this was several years ago, I first started working as a therapist. I was working as a mental health and addictions counselor on the downtown east side of Vancouver. And those of you who are familiar with the downtown east side of Vancouver, you know that it is the largest, poorest area in all of Canada, actually. And it has the largest population of marginalized people. There's a lot of stuff going on down there. It's not necessarily the safest area of town, but I mean, it's still Canada, so it's not, it's not that bad. But I remember the first day I got news that I got this job. I got my first permanent position at a clinic and I called my parents to tell them the good news. And I was so excited. And immediately my dad went into an anxiety response. He started getting really anxious, and bless his heart, it's because he cares and because he wants to make sure that I'm safe. But even at that point, I was a grown adult who was able to make my own choices. And there's one thing about being concerned about someone, another thing about being really overly anxious and putting that anxiety on to the other person. And because at that point, I wasn't able to manage my mind very well. I absorbed all of his anxiety, and it started to make me feel really, really anxious because he was asking me questions like, who are you going to be working with? And what hours are you going to be working? And who else are you what kind of clients are you going to be working with? What are the coworkers like? Is it going to be safe? And like, he was just really getting really worked up about it. And at that point, how I was going to manage this experience of feeling uncomfortable and feeling anxious was to not engage in the conversation. And so I made a request and I said, Dad, I understand that you're nervous about this or feeling anxious about this, but this is my choice. This is what I'm doing. I've decided. And so I'm no longer willing to discuss any of the potential threats or dangers. I said something like that. Probably wasn't quite that eloquent, but something along that line. Maybe it was something a little bit more like, Dad, I'm not having this conversation anymore. I don't want to talk about this. And then he kept doing it. He kept going. He kept saying it. Okay, so that wasn't the boundary. Saying to him, I don't want to talk about this. Please don't talk about this anymore. That wasn't the boundary. That was the request. The boundary came when he continued to do it, continued to bring it up, continued to talk about it after I'd said I didn't want to. So here's the boundary. You can do whatever you want. You can feel anxious about this. I didn't say this, but this is the idea. That person can do whatever they want. They can feel anxious about it. They can talk about it. They can stay doing whatever it is that they are doing, but you decide whether or not you are willing to continue to engage or stick around for it. So I said, Dad, we can either talk about something else. So I said, Dad, I said I don't want to talk about this anymore. So we can either talk about something else or we can talk another time. That's the boundary. You do whatever you need to do, but this is what I am going to do. The next thing, as I mentioned, it is not a requirement. A boundary is not a requirement that somebody else change. It is learning to accept that people will do what they do. Because think about it, if you're like, no, but I can't accept that this person does these things. Well, you trying to nag and push and force them and getting all upset about them being the way that they are and doing what they do and thinking that they have to change, how is that going? If you don't want to be in a relationship with someone because of what they do and how they act and how they treat you, then don't be in the relationship with them. But trying to force them to change and trying to control their choices and ideas and thoughts and behaviors is not going to end well because we can't do it. We have no control over somebody else. And so it's deciding, can I accept this person for who they are and how they do things? If it's your mother or your mother-in-law or your aunt or your sister or your father or your cousin who makes comments about your appearance, about your weight, about your life, about your choices, about whatever it is. That's what they do. That's how they think is an okay, that's what they think is an okay and acceptable way to talk to someone. And they may always think that. And so you get to decide whether or not you're going to have those conversations, or whether or not you're going to decide that you're not going to let it impact you, that you're not going to take it on, that you're not going to take it in. You're going to manage your own mind around whatever they say, and you're going to decide what that means. And so much of our idea around boundaries is about saying this person has to change. They don't have to change. They can do whatever they want. You can decide what you want to do with that, and you can make your own decisions, but they don't have to change. And I think sometimes it's almost even easier, especially when it comes to people that make comments that we don't like, or they say things and they make passive aggressive remarks about our parenting or about our relationship status or whatever it is. If we're good and solid in who we are and what we're doing and where we are in our lives, and if we have done our own inner work to allow ourselves to be who we are and where we are, what somebody else says is up to them. It's their opinion, it's their thoughts, it's their ideas. We don't have to make their thoughts our thoughts. And so if we are managing our minds around people who are saying things and making comments, then they can do whatever they want. And we can decide how we want to feel in light of that. that they are not in control of our emotions. But that does take a lot more work, and that requires that we do learn how to manage our thoughts and manage our emotions and get right with ourselves and do a lot of our inner work and sort of do the work to be in that place of self-love and self-acceptance and solid in who we are. And that does come down the road. If you're not there yet, that's okay. In the meantime, if other people's comments are still really throwing you off, then you're allowed to remove yourself from the conversation or the situation. You don't have to stick around for it. Even if you think that it's going to offend the person, that they're not going to like it, that they are going to be upset if you're not sitting there and being the object of their whatever they have going on in their own lives. So again, a boundary is not a requirement that someone change. You can ask, you can make a request for change, but ultimately basing your happiness and well-being on someone else being a certain way is not going to end well for you. Boundaries are also not about forcing or manipulating or coercing people to play by your rules. They're about saying, these are my rules, and if we're going to play together, then these are my rules. And if you don't want to play by my rules, that is totally fine. Again, you don't have to play by my rules. I'm just going to decide at that point whether I want to continue playing. And so it's not, again, about trying to change or coerce anyone into doing anything differently. And it's not a punishment. That's the other thing. A boundary is not a punishment. It's not about saying you're a mean and awful, horrible person if you don't do what I want. It's about saying everyone has the right to do whatever they want to do, and I have the right to decide whether or not I want to participate in that, whether I want to stick around for that. As soon as we start to set a boundary out of anger or we're trying to be manipulative ourselves by trying to control somebody else, when we're doing it in an attempt to punish someone, it's not going to go well. It's not what a boundary is for. We're just doing the same brand of manipulation that we may be thinking the other person is doing, and we're doing it ourselves. A boundary is also not about trying to get other people to think that what I want, think, need, and feel should be as important to them as it is to me. The truth is, what I think, what you think and need and want and feel is important because it's important to you. And because you are the person who is going to always be the one who is most impacted by your own choices, by your own thoughts, by your own beliefs, by your own needs, and meeting those needs, you are the person who's going to be most impacted by them. It is your responsibility, is my responsibility to do what we need to do to meet those needs instead of expecting that other people should be doing that. Expecting that if you don't do what I want you to do, you're crossing my boundary. If you don't meet my needs and guess my needs and fulfill my needs, then you're crossing my boundary. That is absolutely not a crossing a boundary. That is unhealthy, that is codependent, and that is a recipe for a lot of pain and struggle in our lives if we are believing that other people are there to be responsible for our wants, needs, and preferences. A boundary is also not about someone not meeting our expectations. Even if they have committed or promised or agreed to something and then they're not fulfilling that agreement, that is not a boundary. A boundary comes after we have asked someone to do something, they said they're going to do it, they don't do it, and then we set our boundary at that point. Your choice whether or not you want to fulfill this commitment, and in light of that, this is what I need to do. Let me give you an example. So years ago, when my oldest daughter was a baby, my parents would come and do childcare for us one day a week while I would go down to my office. And they still do that, and it's amazing, and we super appreciate it. And it's been really good for them, it's been really good for us, it's been really good for the kids. But when we were first getting this arrangement going, they would often show up to our house about 10 minutes late. And because I needed to go to work, it would put a lot of extra stress and a lot of extra pressure, and it would make things really tight for me, and it was really, really hard, and I didn't like it. I wanted to leave at a certain time. I wanted to leave at 10 o'clock, and they would get there usually between 5 after and quarter after. And it just wasn't working for me. And so what I decided was I have two choices here. We can stop the arrangement and just say, if you're not able to be there on time, that's totally fine. You've got your own life, you've got your own stuff going on. I get it, your choice, whether or not you can be there on time. But then in light of that, I am going to stop this arrangement. So that was one choice. The other choice was, before I made that choice, before ultimately decided like this wasn't working, I was going to try one more thing. So what I would do And I told them this. I said, if you can't be there right at 10, that's no problem, but I'm going to leave and I'm going to put the baby in the stroller. And because I walk to work, I'm going to take the baby in the stroller, and then you can just come and meet me wherever I'm at. So whenever you get into town, come and meet me where I'm at, and then you can take the baby and I can continue on to work. And so I just decided this is what I need to do to get to myself to work on time, because my parents were not able to get to my house on time. And yes, it did make things a little bit more inconvenient for them, because they'd have to go to my house and pick up the car seat and then come and drive to wherever I was and then put the car seat in the car and get the baby in there and do that transfer. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was extra. And it was just, it would just require extra from them. And a little bit of a pain for them. And they were totally welcome to say, you know what, if that's the arrangement, then we're not willing to do childcare. If we have to come and find you and transfer the baby over, then we're not willing to do childcare for you. And that is totally up to them. But regardless, this is what I needed to do in light of their choice. And I'm going to tell you, it was about 3 times of me leaving the house with the baby in the stroller and them coming to find me and it being a bit of a hassle. It was about 3 times of that before they actually did change the behavior, because they didn't want to do that, because this was my choice. It wasn't trying to be manipulative. I wasn't trying to force them into anything. I was just saying, this is what you need to do. This is what I need to do. And then they decided that them having to come and find me wasn't worth it. They didn't like it. They didn't want to put in that extra effort. And so instead they put the extra effort into coming and being at my house on time. And it's been great ever since. So again, if I was going into that trying to manipulate or coerce or control them, then that wouldn't have gone well. It was a clean decision. It was like, this is what you need to do. This is what I need to do. And then we'll see how that goes and if there's any changes that need to happen from there. So your choice, my choice. Not coming from a place of control or manipulation, coming from a clean, honest, clear place of what we need in those situations. And another really important thing that we need to know about boundaries is that when we set a boundary, it is important that we stick to it. Not just so that other people will know that we mean what we say, but also so that we will know that we mean what we say, for our own sense of integrity, for our own sense of self-respect, for our own sense of confidence and self-esteem, that we can trust ourselves that we are going to follow through on what we say. And again, for other people as well. So if we say one thing, but then we don't really stick to it and we kind of bend the rules, or we're kind of wishy-washy about it, then people just know that, like, oh, she doesn't really mean it and I can do whatever I want and she's not going to do anything about it. And so it's just a big free-for-all. And an example of this one. This was a few years ago. So some of you know this because I've talked about this before, how I have a few offices that I rent out to other therapists who are just starting their practice, who are not ready to sign like a 3-year lease and have a full-time office, to just rent out, sublease to them a couple days a week as they're getting their practice going. And I've been doing this for several years. Don't ask me how I got into it. This was not intentional. I didn't intend to be like a landlord. But here we are. 99% of the people that I've been renting to over the past several years have been wonderful and easy and delightful and flexible, and just we've worked well together. But every once in a while I have had someone who, not that they're doing anything wrong, they just have a different idea of how things should go, about what's normal, about what's reasonable, what's a fair thing to ask for. Just different from what I think. And I remember this was a few years ago. One of my subleasers, one of my renters, asked me, because she said, well, I'm going to be away for December, or for a couple weeks in December. Can I have a reduction in my rent because I'm not going to be using the office? And my immediate thought was, oh my gosh, that's so rude. What an inappropriate thing to ask. I still have to pay for the rent. Why should she think that she should get a break? If I'm not in my office, I still have to pay. And I was just like making all this mental drama in my head, which really was completely unnecessary, because the only reason why I was upset about her request was because I didn't want to have to say no. And so really taking a step back and realizing and recognizing that when we get upset and worked up and all in a tithy because someone has asked something of us, it is only because we are not giving ourselves full freedom and permission to say no. People can ask whatever they want. They are not being rude. They are not being entitled. They are not being demanding. They are just asking because in their mind, according to their rule book, according to their manual, which we need to talk about another day, that is completely reasonable and rational. And just because it's not to us, it doesn't mean that it's not. Our rules are different than their rules. But if, no matter what, we allow ourselves to say no, to not go along with it, to have our own free will and choice about what we are okay with or what we are going to say or how we're going to respond or how we're going to spend our time or whatever it is, they can ask whatever they want. We only get upset when someone asks something of us when we don't allow ourselves or haven't given ourselves full freedom to say no. And this isn't about saying no to everything all the time, but this is about learning how to say yes only when we really mean it and no when we need to. So now our big announcement. Boundaries, the holidays. They need to be going together by Bert and Ernie, but they are often so ridiculously far apart. They are unrecognizable one from the other. And we don't even know how much we are struggling and how much better things could be over the holidays if we had better boundaries. So if you are dreading the holidays for whatever reason, dreading the together time, if you are dreading all of the expectations and all the overwhelm and all the things you need to do and all the obligations and all the avoidance of guilt, if you are trying to just white knuckle it to January and you're like, I just need to get through this, then chances are you need better boundaries over the holidays. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to have them. I have a 90-minute online workshop called 90 Minutes to Better Boundaries Over the Holidays that I want you to come and be a part of. You are going to get so much out of it. And it's going to change things this year. It's going to make things a lot better so that you don't have to be dreading the together time. You don't have to be feeling all kinds of stressed out and overwhelmed for the next several weeks. If you are watching this on the day the video is released, the workshop is happening live tomorrow, but you will get the recording if you can't make it live. So you can watch it. And I'm going to say you need to watch it between now and Christmas. These tools are going to be tools that you can use anytime, any place, with any relationship, but this workshop is going to be specifically focused on the typical things that come up around the Christmas holidays: interactions with family members, demands and expectations, guilt trips, inappropriate comments, all the things that we get stressed out and overwhelmed about with the holidays. That is what we're going to be dealing with. That is what we're going to be sorting through. That is what we're going to be learning how to have really rock star, awesome boundaries around so that this year can be different. The information about this workshop is in the description below. We have a limited amount of spots, so do make sure that you register for that as soon as you can if you watch this video before it's done. Like the video, share it out, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know in the comment section below. What about your idea about boundaries? Did this just blow up? Are you understanding boundaries better now? Does this feel liberating? Does it feel empowering? Are you like, okay, now I know what a boundary is and I'm going to start changing my relationship with them and even how I set them and what I do with them? Would love to hear that in the comment section below. Always good to have you here. Until next time, take good care.